Nathan, this is season 5 of Education for Love and Wisdom.
Wow.
For folks who are joining us for the first time, my name is Jeff Hittenberger. I serve as Dean of the School of Education here at Vanguard University. As you know, Nathan, this season we're focusing on love, wisdom, and belonging. How can we embrace and empower children, young people, and adults with disabilities in schools and in faith communities?
I'm so excited, Jeff. And, recently we hosted the first Disability Symposium, which was a wonderful event we hosted right here at Vanguard University. Over 130 participants coming from our school communities, our faith communities. Lots of great, wonderful insights and rich experiences were shared throughout this event. One of the great things that we had during this symposium was a plenary session, which featured speakers from both of these contexts. They shared some wonderful personal experiences and stories. And so for our listeners at home, want to let you know, we're going to cover the first part of that plenary in this episode, and then we'll get part 2 in the next episode. So let's go ahead and join Dr. Jeff Hittenberger at this plenary session from June of last year.
Let's go. First, let's welcome Dr. Ludmila Praslova. Ludmila is professor and founding director of graduate programs in organizational psychology at Vanguard. She is the author of the award-winning book entitled The Canary Code, A Guide to Neurodiversity, Dignity, and Intersectional Belonging at Work. Huge takeaway for today, make a note of the title of this book. And if you want to follow up and go deep with what we're talking about today, I highly recommend getting a copy of Dr. Praslova's book, The Canary Code. It was listed among the top 10 management books for 2024 by Thinkers 50. Again, let's welcome Ludmila. Next, you've already met Dr. Joanne Van Boxtel, who is the person who made this symposium happen. I want you to know a little bit more about her. She earned her PhD from Chapman University, is a former Long Beach Unified School District special education teacher, curriculum leader, and professional development specialist. Dr. Van Boxtel is a published author and has written and received multiple grants to support special education teacher candidates like those in our new special education credential program at Vanguard. Let's welcome Joanne. Next, I'm delighted to welcome Taylor Green and Kara Green. Let's hear it for them. Taylor is a worship leader and dance instructor and caregiver for her sister. Kara enjoys spending time with family and friends and lights up every room. Taylor and Kara bring great joy and vitality to their life together. They will share insights based on their experiences together as sisters. Let's welcome Taylor and Kara. Next, let's welcome Dr. Rodney Hume Dawson. Rodney is an expert in inclusive practices, education, and disability studies. He completed his PhD in education with emphasis on disability studies at Chapman University. He is a published author and teaches in the liberal studies department and supervises education specialist teacher credentialed candidates in the College of Education at Cal Poly Pomona. He has a very compelling personal journey, which I hope he'll share with us today. Let's welcome Rodney. Finally, help me welcome Joey Borges. Joey is an outstanding teacher in the Access Alternative Education program at the Orange County Department of Education. He holds a mild, moderate, and moderate severe education specialist teaching credential, as well as a master's in educational leadership from Cal State Fullerton. Joey earned a BA in German with a minor in education from UC Berkeley. Somebody who was looking at the script was like, German at Berkeley? Whoa, that's impressive. He also serves on Teacher Education Advisory Council and Special Education Advisory Council at Vanguard. Let's welcome Joey Borges. So panelists, let's jump right into the first question. I'm going to ask each of you about one or two significant experiences in your own life journey that has shaped your vision of inclusion. You have fascinating stories, but I'll ask you to keep these opening remarks to 2 or 3 minutes. Ludmila, would you start us off?
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you for this wonderful introduction. I've been in some form of inclusion for a very long time. I started doing global inclusion, intercultural relations when I was in college. And then I've had multiple iterations throughout my life with different areas of interest that always had some kind of inclusion emphasis. And I was always wondering, why would people pay attention to national cultures but not to gender but not to social economic status? It never made very much sense to me that people would just limit themselves to one aspect of inclusion. But that specifically hit home when I went to a conference on inclusion in higher education, and that was some semi-recently, not super recently, maybe, 6-ish years ago, but way into my career. And that was a very interesting experience. I was super excited. It was just something that I really wanted to do, and really looking forward to that conference. And it was in a nice hotel. The problem was the entire place was playing loud music. And I realized I'm neurotypical appearing, but when you play loud music, I'm not appearing anything but a crying person. So that just wasn't happening. And it just wasn't a super welcoming environment, and people just didn't seem to get why it's a problem. And so to get to the conference, I would just go outside, walk around the building, and go to the conference from the back door. Now, that was Florida in February. So that was possible, actually. It wasn't, Stockholm in winter or Florida in July. And at that particular period of my life, I could also walk without too much trouble. That doesn't necessarily always happen in all of our periods of our lives. And so that just kind of really drove all the aspects of intersectionality home. That it was a conference on inclusion where neurodivergent people who have sensory sensitivities were not welcomed. And let's say if someone had mobility limitations, that also would not have been super welcoming. And so approximately at that time, I just started my newest iteration of inclusion work that has been specifically focused on neurodiversity and disability, in addition to everything that I've been doing. But that was just one of the final calls. There were a couple of other things, but something that really drove the importance of neurodiversity and disability as absolutely essential parts of any kind of approach to inclusion, if it's intersectional and actually inclusive.
Thank you so much, Ludmila. I'm so glad that you have turned your attention to this topic. And you may find that even during the course of this day, there are things that from an accessibility standpoint are less than optimum. Because like every other organization, we're working on it, right? And the idea is that we don't hide it. We say, okay, how can we get better? And that's what we're all working on. And Ludmila helps us tremendously with workplaces and organizations. How do we get better at all of this? So thank you so much. Joanne, one or two significant experiences in your own life journey that have shaped your vision of inclusion.
I thought about this a bit, and one of the stories I wanted to share is about a student named Charles. He was a young man with autism. He was a third grader, and I was his one-on-one paraeducator. This was back in Ohio before I moved out to California. And my experience with him, I think, is what really touched me and got me interested in pursuing special education, working with kids and adults with disabilities. Charles had autism. He did not communicate verbally, but I always knew that he was communicating with me throughout the day, no matter what. If we were doing academics, if I was helping him with any, kind of engagement with students, trying to encourage more peer relationships. And so Charles would, when we would go to the bus, I would, kind of escort him for the bus pickup. And he would always be humming this tune. And he was a very joyful child and just always smiling. So we'd be, going through the hallways. He'd be kind of skipping along, smiling and humming this tune. And I'm like, I know this song, but I can't figure it out. And for multiple days, I was like, gosh, I know this tune. And we're sitting on the bench waiting for the bus. And it dawned on me, this may be for some of our younger folk in here, you may not know, but he was singing the theme song to Cheers, Where Everybody Knows Your Name. So I figured it out. He was kind of looking the other way, and I just sang along with him, Where Everybody Knows Your Name. And he turned, he looked at me, and he put his hand under my chin like, yes, that's the song. And I knew, yes, I knew you were, we had a moment. I knew I was communicating with him and connecting with him. So throughout my time with him, at the time, this was, many years ago, there were strategies for supporting kids who, are emerging in communication. And it was picture exchange communication. Now with technology, it's just exploded as far as opportunities for communication. But I really worked with him in, trying to figure out other ways that we could hear from him, hear his own voice through some of the exchanges with the pictures. But that story, I think, has stuck with me, and also because of the song he was singing, Where Everybody Knows Your Name. And I think that is ultimately what inclusion is all about, that when people with disabilities are not present in our lives, that we miss them, their presence is missed. And so, so that's my story.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Taylor and Kara, one or two significant experiences in your own life journeys that have shaped your vision of inclusion.
Great. Well, just so we know that Kara's nonverbal, so she'll be cheerleading, but not necessarily participating in talking. The thing that came to mind for me is that, with people like Kara who have more of a severe disability, there's not always a lot of opportunity. I know you want it. I know. You have your own. Go ahead. But it's a little bit harder to find programs and things for people like her who have more of a severe disability. And I feel like what I've learned over the years is that the more of the things that we know about, we create, but when we don't understand it, we don't. And for example, what I've learned with her is that anytime you take the time to learn, it gives you the opportunity to not only participate more in what they need, but also to grow as a person. And we have a friend who, she used to horseback ride when she was younger. And we had a friend who'd never really worked with anybody with disabilities. And she started going to horseback riding with her. And it just changed her entire perspective of how to interact with people like her. And, she's her own person. She's very unique. She has her own way of doing things. And I think sometimes when we're uncomfortable or don't understand something, instead of pushing in to learn more, we have a tendency to back off. And so I think one of the things that I've learned in working with her and being with her is to never just kind of be in a place where I'm like, well, since I don't understand, I'm just not going to try to figure it out. But it's so important if we want to include more people to really try to learn and try to see what they're about, especially because everybody's so unique and the things she might like might be different than other people. And I think it's really easy to label people and assume everyone's the same. And so the thing that I've learned is that, there needs to be more spaces for people like her who, do have a harder time communicating what they need, but they also are so fun. She's a blast. And so, to find what she likes and what is fun for her can be rewarding, just as rewarding for me as it is for her, when we try, instead of just letting people like her not have a space. And I feel like especially after high school level, it's really tricky for adults that have a severe disability to have a place. And so I think one of the biggest things I've learned is that if we really take the time to try to learn more about people, just like Joanne said, like they want to be heard, and there's more to learn than we think from them and about them. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Taylor and Kara. Rodney, one or two significant experiences in your own life journey that have shaped your vision of inclusion.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for your benevolent introduction. And thank you, Joanne, for inviting me to be part of this panel and momentous occasion. I do have a couple of events and personal that have shaped my own vision of inclusion. The first one is, I originally came from a country in West Africa. I was born and raised in Sierra Leone, West Africa. And the story I'm going to share is an ableist story of misunderstanding and misconception about people with disabilities. And so my parents had 4 children. I was their last. And my mother especially wanted me to go to school like all of our 3 other children. And when it came time for that to happen, private and public schools, she really worked hard, to try to get me into private and public schools. And unfortunately, all of them said no, and refused me an education. And I think what we can learn from this story, the wonderful thing about my story, is that advocacy, and community involvement is very, very involved. So what my parents did was to get my uncles and aunts on both sides, on my mother's side and my father's side, my grandparents who were living at the time, and they all started advocating on my behalf, and they wrote letters, right? And it took a while, but eventually I was able to get into schools, not the ideal one that my parents would have liked, but I eventually got accepted. And I say this very humbly. I think when you think about, they made assumptions about me without really knowing me. And part of the reason why they refused me an education, which was my right, was because of issues like, well, is he going to be a burden? How is he going to move around? What if he falls, right? Who will take care of him? And all these kinds of things. And they were making assumptions about somebody that they did not even know. So making assumptions about people with disabilities is something that we need to be very cautious about. I would then go on throughout primary and secondary school and eventually college, and then came to America and pursued graduate work at Chapman University, where I eventually got my PhD. And this is very humbling for me because for someone who was refused an education, look at what eventually happened. The very system that refused me schooling is the very system where I now work and trying to make a difference, right? And the second thing, and I'll make this brief, is I have to tell you, the most transformative experience in my life really happened when I got enrolled at Chapman to pursue my PhD work. I'd come to Chapman with a lot of stigma burden. I call it stigma burden in my life, given all of the stigma that I had experienced. And my mother did something powerful for me. My mother was a great woman of faith. When I was very young, she would carry me in her arms and she would read Bible stories of all these great prophets and great people. And she would tell me, Rodney, you don't worry. God is watching over you. God loves you. But of course, as you go on and people stigmatize you and they label you and they refuse you so many things, it carries a weight. I went to Chapman and the exposure, and I was very lucky. I ended up working with Dr. Phil Ferguson, who was a heavyweight in disability studies and special education. And the exposure to the readings, the exposure to the kinds of projects I got involved in, and eventually my dissertation work, really solidified what my mother had always taught me, that God is always on your side, that you are worthy, that you are just like everybody else, and God loves you. And so I am blessed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rodney. Joey, one or two significant experiences in your own life journey that have shaped your vision of inclusion.
Thank you, Jeff. Also, thank you for the introduction. Thank you, Joanne and Jeff, for including me and everybody else up here on the panel. And thank you to all of you for including us in your schedule today. I think for me, my story of, I think how inclusion was shaped in my mind started with an experience of being excluded. And I think it started pretty early on in my life when I was placed in, assessed and considered eligible for an IEP. I was then in an SDC class, and then fast forward years later, I'm now a special ed teacher. A lot of stuff happened in between there, but we only have 2 minutes for the story. And so the last thing I wanted to do was be a teacher. As my neighbor here just explained, wanting to work in the system that kind of held you back seems kind of ironic, kind of like a group of people who decide to come to an inclusion symposium and then you're telling them about inclusion. You guys are the ones who probably get it, right? But not to say, I totally appreciate and love the fact that we're all here together. But so I ended up because of my own life trajectory and because of my own experiences and having a solid support system and people who didn't have answers and were willing to find answers to help me access my education, was able to then come back. It was in the 2008 time period. There weren't a lot of jobs out there. So I started subbing and I just kept resisting, ended up, I just dove in. And so I found myself sitting at IEP meetings across the table from families, parents, advocates, anybody, CASA reps, anybody who may be representing a child with an IEP. And I didn't realize until I was in that situation the value and the perspective, because I'd lived the experience, right? And so you can know, but I think we really learn by doing. At least that's my story. And so I just got the opportunity to do something that I think is very logical. It makes a lot of sense to do inclusion, but it's really hard work. If you do it quick and fast, sometimes it won't work out because people aren't aware of the hard work that it takes. But I think it's good work, and I think it's the work that we need to do, because if we do it here, if we do it in our educational institutions, in our faith communities, in our workplaces, wherever, everybody else will follow suit. right? So if we use segregation at a young age in schools and we exclude kids at a young age in schools, and then after high school and after college, we're like, hey, where did these individuals go? It's a direct result of how we handled it early on. And so I was very fortunate. My disability isn't something you would look at me and see. And I had tremendous advocates in my life. Other people don't have the same situation, right? It's everybody, each of you has a fascinating story of inclusion, right? I mean, everybody can think of a time when they were excluded and how that felt.
Education for Love and Wisdom is produced by the School of Education at Vanguard University of Southern California. Our goal is to equip teachers to educate with love and wisdom, especially in these complicated times. If you'd like to learn more about our education programs, please visit us online at www.vanguard.edu and search for School of Education. If you'd like to leave us a comment, a question, or you have thoughts to share, feel free to email us at loveandwisdom@vanguard.edu. That's love and wisdom with no spaces at vanguard.edu, and leave us a message. A special thank you to all who have contributed to this episode, and a thank you to you, our listeners, for joining us on this episode of the Education for Love and Wisdom podcast.